Today, 9 unelected justices can decide who we can marry, what our bodies can do, how elections are run, and which laws stand or fall. But when the Supreme Court was first written into existence in the Constitution, it had none of that power. Back in the years after the Revolutionary War, the United States was still finding its footing. The Constitution had just been ratified in 1787. Congress was busy writing laws, the president held executive power, and the judicial branch, well, it was barely more than a footnote. Article 3 of the Constitution simply stated, "The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court." That was it. It was like being crowned king of an empty castle. The Supreme Court had no real authority, no clear role, and little public respect. But it didn't start out that way. So how did the Supreme Court become one of the most influential institutions in the country? And how much power does it really have? To answer that, we have to go back to one key individual, John Marshall. Marshall's life would take a turn in 1801. Outgoing President John Adams appointed him as the 4th Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The title sounded powerful, but at the time, the court lacked influence and resources. It was widely seen as the weakest branch of the government. Then, a case landed in Marshall's lap, Marbury v. Madison. In his final hours, President Adams rushed to appoint new judges, including William Marbury. But Marbury's new role wasn't delivered before Thomas Jefferson took office. Jefferson's Secretary of State, James Madison, refused to hand it over. He viewed Adams's appointments as a final attempt to implement his party's influence in the government. So Marbury sued and appealed to the court to enforce his appointment, because Section 13 of the Judiciary Act of 1789 gave the court the power to do so. Marshall was stuck. He had dreamed of a powerful court, but this case could make or break that vision. If the court ruled to have Marbury fill the role, Jefferson might ignore the ruling, making the court look powerless. Or if the court decided to do nothing, it would look weak. Marshall needed a third option, and he soon found one. In the height of the political drama, Marshall ruled that yes, Marbury had a right to his commission, but the part of the law that gave the court power to enforce that ruling, he declared it unconstitutional. That decision cost Marbury his job. It gave Jefferson a win he was hoping for, but it handed the court something far greater, the power to strike down laws. This was the first instance of judicial review, the court's power to strike down laws it deems unconstitutional, paving the foundation for the court's power and authority today. And with each ruling over the years, Marshall elevated the judiciary from an afterthought to a fully empowered branch of government. He never grabbed power, he simply crafted it case by case with strategic precision. Today, the Supreme Court sits atop a 3-tier federal system. Beneath it are 13 circuit courts and 94 district courts. The Supreme Court only accepts a handful of cases each year, ones deemed to be significant in either setting a precedent in lower courts or having national implications, like Roe v. Wade for abortion rights or Obergefell v. Hodges for legalizing same-sex marriage. From the thousands of cases elevated to the court each year, it only takes 4 justices to agree to hear a case. This is called the Rule of 4. After oral arguments and private deliberation, a majority opinion is written, something Marshall established to show a unified and powerful court. But here's the thing. There's no law that states how judges must interpret laws or how they should rule. So at times, lawyers aren't simply stating their cases. They're strategically trying to appeal to the basis of how the judge has ruled in the past. And typically, a judge's decision may fall under one of 3 categories. Some judges stick strictly to law and precedent. Others let personal values guide them. And some weigh politics and institutional reputation too. However, how judges make their decisions is widely unknown. There are multiple instances of judges breaking ideological ranks. Like in 2023, Chief Justice Roberts and Justices Kavanaugh and Barrett, often considered to be conservative-leaning, joined the court's 3 liberal-leaning justices, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson, to block enforcement of a Florida law banning drag shows in the state. The remaining 3 justices, Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch, often lean conservative in their decisions. Yet the court isn't without its controversies. In 1927, the court ruled that state-run mental health facilities could sterilize patients in Buck v. Bell, or in Korematsu v. United States in 1944. The court ruled it illegal for the forced internment of Japanese Americans who live near military bases on the West Coast, completely disregarding their rights. But while the Supreme Court's power is immense, it isn't unchecked. It can't pass laws, but it can strike down or reshape ones that are passed. or Congress can simply pass new laws that then tweak the previous rulings from the court. It can't enforce its rulings either. It doesn't have a military at its disposal. But historically, its decisions have been followed. Still, confidence in the court has dwindled in recent years. In 2000, Bush v. Gore effectively decided the presidential election after a contested Florida vote count, leaving many questioning the court's impartiality. In 2022, the court overturned Roe v. Wade, ending federal protection for abortion rights and handing the decision back to the states. And over the years, other rulings have deepened partisan divides, casting doubt on the court's neutrality. Fewer than half of Americans now view the Supreme Court favorably, and nearly half believe the court holds too much power. Another point of tension has been around the justices being appointed for life. Article 3 of the Constitution never outwardly states how long a judge may serve, just that as long as the judge is in good behavior. So the courts have interpreted that to mean for life, or until a judge decides to retire, which, historically, judges have strategically waited to do, to ensure their successor closely aligns with their political leanings. In recent years, justices like Clarence Thomas have faced mounting criticism over undisclosed gifts and financial ties, raising questions about transparency and trust. Between 2004 and 2023, Thomas reported over 100 gifts worth $2.4 million. For comparison, every other justice combined disclosed just 93 gifts totaling $248,000. But then came reports of private jets, luxury vacations, and other undisclosed perks, pushing his estimated total over $4 million. In his defense, Thomas shared that his judicial colleagues said he didn't have to disclose those trips. But to critics, it felt less like oversight and more like the court was operating in a world unrestricted by ethics. So, how much power does the Supreme Court really have? The answer, like many of its rulings, is complicated, and while it has the power and authority of the law of the land, it has taken years of strategic decisions to obtain it. Today, the Supreme Court can decide who gets married, what your body is allowed to do, how elections are run, and which laws stand or fall. But the court isn't all-powerful. It can't write laws, it can't enforce them, and their decisions only hold weight if the country respects the institution behind them. Which is why the question might not just be how much power the court has, but how that power is used, and who holds the court accountable when it may stray too far from individual rights, like in Buck v. Bell. Because in a system built on checks and balances, even the final word needs accountability.